Cool. Hey, I'm Alex. I'm the bass player for Electric Tapestry. I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of the gear that I use to make the bass sound that you hear. I don't really use a lot in the way of effects or any kind of pedals. I do a nice clean sound. I'll talk a little bit about the bass that I use, my settings, and a little bit about my technique, which I use with my fingers. So the bass that I use a Fender Jazz. I'm a big fan of the Fender Jazz bass. It's just an awesome instrument. It's got a cool look to it. It's got a great sound. This one I actually got from Music Planet about 2.5 years ago in September of 2020. It's an awesome bass. It's got an amazing neck, very similar to how Fender Jazzes in the 60s had the necks were made. They were very kind of flat, a little bit like this one. It's really good for my hand shape because I can. It's really good for sliding, and I can move about the neck very easily. Yeah, so I'll touch a little bit about also the strings I use. I use Rotosound 66, like many other great players throughout rock and roll history. Rotosound's an awesome set of strings, one of the best. Give you a bit of a rundown of my the settings that I use. This isn't my amp. This is HiViz's amp, but these are some of the settings I get used to make my sound. My sound is inspired by, I'd say it's like some of the players that I really love. I was a big Geddy Lee fan, Geddy Lee of Rush, also a big Tony Levin fan. I've actually met Tony Levin a couple times. Wonderful guy, by the way. Yeah, so I really like a big beefy bass sound that cuts, but is also very clean sounding. And so how I get that sound is I have the bass on the preamp turned up quite a ways, like it's almost about 3/4 of the way across, and usually have the mid-range just about right there, maybe sometimes a little bit less than that. Then I turn the treble down a little bit. For pickups, both pickups are on full. Sometimes for other songs like Not to Shatter, I roll the bridge pickup off a little bit, and that creates a bit of a kind of like a soft kind of a Motown song. Because the bass line is inspired a little bit by Jamerson and Motown, but for most part, I have both pickups on full. I roll the tone off a little bit towards the back. Yeah, so for my for my hand technique, I use there's a couple of techniques that I use, but the main one that I have is if you look at my fingers. You may have noted some bass players, they like to rest their thumb on the pickup or sometimes even on the E string. I found a technique, I forget exactly where I found it, where I actually use my thumb a little bit like a rest for my index and middle fingers. And I use it a little bit like that. I find that's really good for especially going up and down the neck, like a little bit like that, yeah. It's really good for, this technique is great for, sometimes you can get a sound a little bit like a pick, like for the song Outer Space. I actually even just play like this. You can see like I have my finger kind of hooked underneath the string there. I just do a little bit of a pull. It's not like that, but just like... I get kind of like a very kind of compressed sound, a little bit like I'm playing with a pick, but I'm not playing with a pick at all. Never have. And other times for songs like The Train, which I wrote, I use a little bit like, kind of like a bit like what John Entwistle does, where he really almost slaps the string. So I'm playing like way up here on the neck pickup, and using both fingers, I'm just kind of hammering the strings really hard, so that's how you hear. Like that. Yeah, so that's a real awesome sound. So yeah, those are the tricks that I use, not very fancy, but they sound amazing, and the bass sounds amazing.
Hi, my name is Nick. I play guitar in Electric Tapestry. I play a cheap version of a Les Paul because I can't afford a real one, or even an Epiphone. So I've got a vintage, which is made by UK luthier. But the good thing is that the G string stays more in tune with this. I chose this instrument because Ace Frehley is one of my favorite guitarists because he hardly knows any musical theory and he rocks. Yeah, so I like a lot of open strings like this kind of sounds weird when you play it together, but when you play it separately. So yeah, it is out of tune, yeah. Deliberately. Yeah, I meant to do that. But I've got a tuner, which is the first and most important pedal I've got, which makes it sound okay. And indeed, Geoff is right. It's way out of tune because I dropped it on the last song. But now it's fine. I use mainly Boss because they're cheap. I have a delay pedal, which sounds like this. And I like to use delay pedals a lot. I've got 2 delay pedals. This is a Boss one, and this is an Ashton, which is very, very cheap. So that one's good because no one uses that because no one wants an effect pedal that sounds like this. So unless you're me, I do want that. So anyway, so I also have a flanger, sounds a bit like this. A phaser, which is kind of like a faster flange. It's a little bit more subtle. An equalizer, which I use just for guitar pedals, for guitar solo, sorry. And I need to cut through. A harmonizer, which plays another note with my guitar note that I've played, so rather than, so you can sound like Queen. A distortion pedal. And then I've got a couple of effects that I put on my voice for ends of songs. They're mainly TC Electronics stuff and also a very cheap reverb. So I'm a fan of cheap pedals, as you can see, and cheap guitars. When I put all of them on, which I do twice in our set, it sounds like this. Which is useful, but it feels a little bit like I'm a tap dancer. But that's okay because there's lots of flashing lights at the top and people think I know what I'm doing. And yeah, that's how I get my sound.
Hi, I'm Geoff from Electric Tapestry. Just give you a quick rundown on the equipment I've got today. I'm playing a Fender Squier Strat, which I bought from Cash Converters a few years ago for $200, and it came with a Line 6 amp as well, which is shit, but hey, this thing's beautiful over here. I made a few modifications, so I pulled out all the electronics and put in proper stuff. But the best thing I've done, I don't know if you can see that there, is I've pulled out the tremolo and I've jammed the massive bolt, or it's a nut in there, so it doesn't move at all. And this baby just stays in tune, eh? It's amazing. I hardly have to tune it, and that's all I need, really. Play and tune. So for effects, I've got a Boss ME25, which I stole off my little brother. He never used it. So that's what I got there. I've just got 2 settings I use. I've got like a nice sort of clean sound with a bit of compression, a little bit of reverb, little delay. And then I use the 5-way selector on the Fender Squier to get a bit of variation in tone. And then I've got more of a heavy sound, so I do the solos with that one. So trying to keep it simple, and I also use the wah function on the old Boss as well. So that's about it for me. Nice and simple setup. Yeah, limit the things that can go wrong. Cheers.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm one of the guitarists from Electric Tapestry. So yeah, this is my rig. Basically, I've got a HiViZ and Kettner Tube Meister 18, nice little tube amp. It's was only running on 5 watts tonight, so plenty of grunt, but it can do 18 as well. louder gigs. And it's just an old Marshall valve state that I'm just using it as a cab, and it works really well. So I've got some pedals down here. It's got my volume pedal. I use it sometimes. And the old classic tube screamer. That's not it. And I've got a couple of pedals here. Tony Peppers down in Dunedin makes them. So we've got a RDM, the Russian Doom Machine, and a Wendigo, formerly the Satanist. Got some balls, and we've got a flanger, and a cheap tremolo. And the old flashback from TC Electronics. Pretty good little delay pedal. And because that amp doesn't come with a reverb, we've got a Fox Spring reverb down there, which gives it a bit more life. And yeah, my PRS, I'm left-handed, so there's not a lot of choice around. This is a pretty good guitar, and it's done me well.
HiViZ Jams.
HiViZ Jams.
HiViZ Jams.